May 19th, 45. Germany falls, and with it, the Luftwaffe disappears, almost instantly. Throughout Europe, countless German aircraft lie deserted, from legendary combat planes to revolutionary jets and half-built experimental designs. The victorious powers now possess machinery that's generations beyond anything else, and a quiet competition starts to collect, examine, or demolish whatever they discover. The Luftwaffe's aircraft at war's end. When Germany laid down arms in early May 1945, the Luftwaffe had essentially stopped operating. A-planes sat empty on landing strips, stretching from Scandinavia to the Alps. Some undamaged, others cannibalized for components or wrecked by aerial attacks. Petroleum scarcity, fragmented leadership, and demolished facilities had kept numerous squadrons inactive for many days. When the official surrender came on May 8th, vast numbers of aircraft stayed exactly where they'd been left. Quiet testimony to an air force that had once ruled European skies. Throughout Germany's northern territories, important locations like Flensburg and Lübeck contained massive quantities of inactive aircraft, some whole, others broken or incomplete. In Prague, storage facilities were packed with Messerschmitts, Hunkels, and late-period experimental models. At Rechling, the Luftwaffe's primary research base, Allied inspectors discovered test aircraft, aerodynamic testing equipment, and engineering records that exposed the breadth of Germany's jet and rocket programs. The range of remaining aircraft caught many Allied commanders off guard. Besides well-known designs like the Messerschmitt Bf-109 and Focke-Wulf FW-10, they uncovered sophisticated developments, including the Arado R-2034 jet attack plane, the Heinkel He-162, and fragments of ventures like the Junkers J-287 heavy bomber. Cargo and surveillance aircraft, such as the Junkers J-52 and Heinkel He-111, lay dispersed across numerous fields. Multiple units had exhausted their fuel supplies during the conflict's closing weeks, resulting in machines sitting idle and untouched. When combat ceased, the Luftwaffe's organizational framework had broken down completely. Officers yielded to whatever Allied troops they met, and maintenance personnel frequently left their positions without instruction. Aircraft service logs, fuel storage areas, and equipment stockpiles were either partial or ruined. The Allied Control Commission rapidly implemented firm regulations. Every German airplane was forbidden to fly, and no German aviator could take to the air without explicit Allied permission. These restrictions sought to block unauthorized departures, flight attempts, or transportation of high-ranking personnel. A discussion quickly developed among Allied leadership regarding what deserved preservation versus destruction. Some commanders maintained that German planes represented a danger if kept functional, while others recognized their value for scientific study. What's evident is that from the earliest days following surrender, determining the destiny of the Luftwaffe's aircraft became an issue of espionage, supply management, and diplomatic strategy. Allied seizure of Luftwaffe technology. Immediately after Germany's capitulation, the victors initiated widespread recovery campaigns to obtain the Luftwaffe's most sophisticated aircraft. America acted initially. On May 9, 1945, just one day past the formal surrender, American intelligence squads began Operation Lusty, standing for Luftwaffe Secret Technology. Directed by Colonel Harold Watson, these groups fanned out across Germany, Austria, and Czechoslovakia. Their objective was straightforward: find cutting-edge aircraft, collect engineering documentation, and ship chosen machines to America for evaluation. At Lechfeld in Germany, American forces captured multiple intact Messerschmitt Me-262 jets. At Grove Airfield in Denmark, they discovered Arado jet bombers alongside various late war prototypes. Aircraft judged worthwhile were either flown away or taken apart for transport to the Wright Field Research Facility in Ohio. Additional examples traveled to Freeman Field in Indiana, where assessment teams cataloged machinery, power plants, and technical characteristics. Aviators from the Whizzers flight unit conducted test flights of seized jets under supervised circumstances. Their observations influenced early American comprehension of angled wings, jet technology, and high-velocity flight dynamics. Britain initiated a corresponding operation called Operation Surgeon. Different from the Americans who concentrated on acquiring actual aircraft, the British showed equal interest in the designers, researchers, and specialists who created them. Teams from the Royal Aircraft Establishment entered airfields at Fassberg, Schleswig, Husum, and Rechling. questioning remaining staff and collecting documents. Chosen professionals were brought to British installations for peacetime work. At RAF Farnborough, experimental pilots operated captured aircraft, including the Me-262, to gain deeper insight into its capabilities and limitations. The British showed particular fascination with the He-162, whose minimalist construction provided teachings for future training craft and defensive fighters. The Soviet Union responded swiftly as well. Their trophy units captured manufacturing plants and airfields throughout Saxony, Thuringia, Silesia, and Czechoslovakia. Significant production facilities like the Avia workshops in Prague and the Bf-109 construction facilities in Moravia came under Soviet authority. Aircraft were transported eastward by train, together with manufacturing tools and technicians. At military bases surrounding Moscow and Leningrad, Soviet aviators and engineers studied the Me-262 and R-234, incorporating their discoveries into early jet initiatives. Rivalry soon appeared among the victors. Each nation desired access to the scarcest aircraft, particularly experimental designs that existed in limited quantities. Disputes arose over which side held rights to specific machines, especially at sites in central Germany, where American and Soviet troops appeared within days of each other. The Allied Control Council tried to organize collection activities, but friction, reflecting emerging Cold War tensions, was already apparent. German workers filled a significant function in these initiatives. Former aviators, technicians, and designers answered technical inquiries, sometimes under watch and sometimes through temporary work contracts. Their explanations assisted Allied teams in operating complicated systems, like the Jumo 004 jet power plant, the BMW 003, and sophisticated navigation instruments. The Allies recorded everything: photographs, technical drawings, operational manuals, and experimental reports, before determining which aircraft to retain and which to eliminate. By late 1946, the principal collection operations were finished. Dozens of Luftwaffe aircraft had been transferred to the United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union for examination. These initiatives influenced early jet advancement and established the foundation for the subsequent phase, the elimination of everything that remained, the mass destruction program. By late 1945, the Allied Control Council decreed that Germany couldn't maintain any military aviation. The most precious specimens had already been shipped overseas. The thousands remaining were designated for elimination, converting airfields throughout Europe into enormous junkyards between 1945 and 1948. The order was plain. Every German airplane, fighters, bombers, transports, trainers, and prototypes, had to be destroyed unless set aside for research purposes. Installations like Flensburg, Lübeck-Blankensee, Grove, and Tarnowitz became demolition centers where Allied workers dismantled and flattened airframes, channeling metal back into Europe's reconstruction sectors. At Grove, lines of combat planes were taken apart. In northern Germany, British teams demolished undamaged bombers that had outlasted the war. Even late-war jets were broken down unless already allocated to research programs. Some aircraft were incinerated in trenches or placed onto vessels and submerged along the coastline. Many of these underwater remains still rest where they settled, occasionally found by underwater explorers. Civil aviation encountered restrictions too. Aircraft like the Junkers Ju-52, which served both military and commercial functions, were examined individually. Some were modified for restricted transport duties, but numerous were still scrapped for uniformity with Allied regulations. In Czechoslovakia, captured aircraft briefly entered service under new labels before most were withdrawn and dismantled. France, which flew several German types for instruction in testing, ultimately discontinued them, as replacement parts became scarce and maintenance difficulties mounted. Scholars continue debating whether additional aircraft could have been saved. Various experts contend that many historically singular airframes were lost during this era, simply because no collections or repositories had capacity to house them. Others observe that Allied concerns centered on disarmament, not conservation, and that the political determination to dismantle Germany's military apparatus exceeded worries about historical significance. The restricted number of surviving Luftwaffe aircraft today directly results from this disposal period. Financial considerations also influenced the destruction operation. Metal scarcities across Europe meant that aluminum and steel from Luftwaffe aircraft represented precious commodities. Recycling airframes helped supply industries manufacturing consumer products, construction materials, and equipment much like fighter jets. For many local laborers, dismantling aircraft offered reliable work during a difficult transition period. By 1948, the overwhelming majority of Luftwaffe aircraft had ceased to exist. The runways that once accommodated major combat wings and bomber formations were emptied or reassigned. Some became practice areas for Allied occupation troops. Others returned to agricultural use or became civilian airports. Aircraft that continued flying, even as most Luftwaffe aircraft were demolished after 1945, a smaller quantity entered a new existence under foreign control. From 1946 forward, multiple nations flew German-designed aircraft due to necessity, accessibility, or technical curiosity. These fleets are frequently temporary, but they fulfilled an important function in early post-war aviation. Czechoslovakia became among the first countries to repurpose German equipment. Manufacturing plants in Prague, Kunovice, and Letňany contained both finished aircraft and partially completed airframes, which technicians assembled into operational fighters. The most notable outcome was the Avia S-199. Though challenging to control, the S-199 supplied the Czechoslovak Air Force until newer Soviet aircraft superseded it. Multiple examples were subsequently sold to Israel, becoming that nation's first fighter aircraft in 1948. Spain also prolonged the existence of German fighters. Under manufacturing agreements dating to the late 1930s, Spanish facilities constructed the Hispano Aviation HA1112, a modified Messerschmitt B509 configuration with Spanish-produced engines. These aircraft operated in the Spanish Air Force through the mid-1950s. Their most recognized role occurred years later when they were employed to represent German fighters in motion pictures like the Battle of Britain. Norway flew captured Bf-109s and R-96 trainers during its early post-war reconstruction phase. Component shortages ultimately grounded these planes, but several airframes endured long enough for restoration projects in the 1960s and 1970s. Commercial aviation also gained indirectly from surviving German engineering. The Junkers J-52 shifted into passenger operations in multiple nations. In France, the Toucan version was manufactured at the Amiens facilities and employed in colonial freight functions. Lufthansa briefly operated J-52s in the early 1950s before transitioning to modern-built aircraft. When West Germany formed the Bundesluftwaffe in 1956, none of the previous Luftwaffe aircraft were deemed suitable for operational deployment. The new Air Force depended on Allied constructed designs like the F-84 Thunderstreak, Canadair Sabre, and subsequently the F-104 Starfighter. German aviation tradition had progressed into the jet era, abandoning wartime configurations. Initiatives to conserve surviving airframes expanded in the latter half of the 20th century. Many contemporary museum exhibits originate from accident locations, isolated lakes, or long-concealed wrecks from the Eastern Front. Restorers frequently had to merge components from multiple aircraft to produce a single exhibition model. In the current period, only a limited quantity of intact Luftwaffe aircraft still exist. Specimens of the Me-262, Bf-109, FW-190, and Arado R-234 occupy museums from Washington to Berlin, while a handful of privately constructed reproductions appear at airshows. Nearly all original wartime airframes stay earthbound. What endures today represents merely a fraction of the extensive force once distributed across Europe. Silent fluid, silent monuments to how rapidly even the most advanced machines can vanish, and how the post-war world transformed the inheritance of German aviation. If you enjoyed this exploration, watch what happened to German U-boats after WW2. Next, an in-depth examination of how the submarine fleet was seized, analyzed, and dispersed across the globe following the war. Like this video, subscribe. Thanks for watching.